And good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of Drive for Life. I'm your host, Brian Martindale. Today, and my guest is Abby Gray. And it's going to be a very special episode and all the things we're going to touch on her being an author and being involved with somebody who's had a liver transplant and more. And I'll do a little introduction here, and then we'll let Abby tell you about that. Abby Gray is a writer, speaker, and a passionate advocate for organ donation, infertility awareness, and mental health. What began as therapeutic blog in 2017, where she and her husband Marie were navigating chronic illness and infertility, evolved into a powerful platform of connection and hope. And she's the author of children's books, Clayton Sparks Leaves His Marks, which honors organ donation and gently teaches kids about kindness, generosity, and the lasting impact of one life can make. After years of heartbreak and uncertainty, their lives changed the way they could never imagine in a life-saving liver transplant, a growing community of support, and the arrival of miracle twins. Abby now shares their journey in her memoir, Impatiently Waiting for Miracles, a raw, inspiring look at grief, resilience, and the power of saying yes to hope. Abby Gray, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
I'm excited too. Let's get into Abby Gray's life. Let's start from your beginning, wherever you'd like.
Yeah. So I met my husband on a blind date in 2011, and we got married in 2014. And a couple months after, he was diagnosed with primary sclerosing cholangitis and ulcerative colitis.
Okay.
And so we very quickly started navigating some, chronic illnesses for him.
Right.
Um, and then shortly after, we started trying for a family.
Okay.
And during that time, we were met with significant struggles there as well as we went through infertility and pregnancy losses and 3 rounds of IVF. And all the while, my husband was getting sicker. And so what should have been a honeymoon phase for us quickly turned into us having a lot of really hard conversations.
Right.
Um, yeah.
So after you were married and everything, you went through the infertility issues, and let's talk about that first before the liver. Okay. I mean,
Yeah.
elaborate a little bit more on that, and then that led you to actually being a book author on that also.
Yes. So, shortly after, we were married and we knew that my husband had this disease and, that it may present challenges in the future,
Mhm.
but it wasn't something that was, super, pressing at the time, we thought.
You
And
thought.
so we said, let's start trying to have a family. We were already, 28 at the time and 9 months after we found out we were pregnant and we were so excited. We thought, that 9 month period was really hard because we
Sure.
thought, that was a long wait.
Right.
But then shortly after, a couple weeks later, we found out it was ectopic and I was rushed into emergency surgery.
Right.
Um, and so one of my fallopian tubes was removed, and we went on to, um, you know, deal with infertility for the next 15 months, and then
Okay.
found out we were pregnant again right before we were to start IVF. And so we thought, this is it. This is our blessing. And at 10 weeks, we found out we had a miscarriage, which means the baby's heart just stopped, and we didn't know it until we went in for an ultrasound. Um, and so that was really, really hard. We had to lean on our support system, and I found a support group for infertility
Mhm.
and started sharing a little bit more at that time about what we were going through.
Okay.
Um, the following January, a couple months later, we were pregnant again,
Okay.
had another loss.
Oh.
And at that point, it was like I felt so broken. It was like, okay, I have to do something. Like I have to figure out a different way to process all that we're going through. Because my husband was also getting sicker at the time, and it was just a lot at once.
Right.
And so I started blogging at that point.
Okay.
Yeah, so after our third loss,
Yeah.
I went, I just sat down one day and I typed it out. And my husband's a little more private.
Right.
I tend to share all of my business with everyone, but he's a little more private. And so I sent the first blog to him and I said, look, I'd like to start sharing this. How do you feel about it? And his response was, if it helps you, I want you to do it. But
Okay.
if at any point it becomes something that is more hurtful than helpful,
Right.
I want you to step away from it.
Yeah.
And so that really helped to have his support, and he read through every blog post I put out there. I was very honest about, everything we were going through with the infertility.
Right. And I'm sure that was
And
very therapeutic for you to do.
it really was. I got a lot of people saying, reaching out and saying, "Oh my gosh, I'm going through the same thing and didn't know who
Right.
to talk to about it."
Right.
Suddenly I had this support system,
Right.
not only of, our family and friends and people close to us, but people in an extended support system that, you know, came alongside us during that time.
Right.
And
It
so
just
that was
developed that.
huge.
Yeah.
Yeah. The power of the community kind of at that point just kind of developed around us, and it made a huge difference.
Okay. And
Yeah.
then from there,
Mhm.
what was the next big thing?
So from there, right shortly after that, my husband got really sick. He was hospitalized, and I know we'll go more into the liver transplant, but at that point is when they told us he needed to be listed for a transplant.
Okay.
And then right after that, we started IVF. And so
While he's
we
listed for liver transplant.
yes, yes, we were traveling across the US to get him listed at different locations. And and I was going through IVF. We went through 3 rounds of IVF.
Okay.
Our first 2 rounds, they said all of our embryos were abnormal. And our third round, we decided not to test. And we went in for our third transfer, our first 2 transfers. The first one was a miscarriage, second
Okay.
one didn't take. And then the third one, we were going in to transfer what we thought was our last untested embryo. And we learned that one of our abnormal embryos from one of the first rounds was actually mosaic, which means that it has both normal and abnormal cells.
Okay.
And so we decided to take a chance on that embryo, and we now have 6-year-old twins.
Oh,
And so one of those was one of our abnormal embryos. She's one of our huge miracles that kind of happened along the way, because yeah, it's amazing that she's even here today. So
yeah, your miracles.
yes,
Yeah. So
sure.
that was just a powerful story. I wanted to make sure you got through that. Um, we also have an organ donation story in here too to talk about.
We do.
So maybe we should touch a little bit on that right now. How did that first come about? Well, let's get into at least that part.
So, whenever my husband was diagnosed with primary sclerosing cholangitis, so that is a disease where the bile ducts of the liver get really, really scarred and blocked,
Okay.
and over time it causes cirrhosis of the liver.
Oh,
But one of the bigger risks with PSC is that you're at a very high chance of developing cholangiocarcinoma, which is bile duct cancer, and that
okay.
has a very low rate of survival. And so it's really scary.
Right.
Um, there's no cure for PSC. The only treatment is a liver
Right.
transplant. Not every PSC patient needs a liver transplant.
Okay.
Some can live with PSC for many, many years and never need one. And so we were hoping that that would be my
Okay.
husband.
Right.
Yeah, we were hoping that he would be one of those lucky people that we could just keep watching the disease and that it wouldn't progress to the point of needing a liver transplant. But within a couple of years, it became very evident that that was not going to be the case for him.
Okay. Let's touch on the rest of that. We're going to take a short commercial break, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be right back with more of this episode of Drive for Life.
You'll do better at Garber. When you choose Garber Chevrolet in Midland, you become a partner in helping local organizations better the lives of thousands, generously giving back to our community since 1907. We support numerous local efforts to continuously better our Midland area communities. And together, we're able to make a difference. And your vehicle doesn't cost you a penny more with Garber's low price guarantee. Choose Garber Chevrolet in Midland. You'll get a better price and be a part of making better happen right here in Midland.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Drive for Life. I'm again your host, Brian Martindale. I'm with Abby Gray today, and we were just touching on a liver transplant story for a husband. Let's continue on that, Abby, where we left off.
Yeah, so a couple years after he was diagnosed, he was hospitalized right after our third pregnancy loss. He woke up in the middle of the night and was in excruciating pain. He had developed a cholangitis infection. And so it's a real bad infection within his GI system.
Right.
And by the time they were able to, we went to the ER. By the time they were able to get him up to a hospital room, he was borderline septic. Cholangitis is a very scary infection. If you don't catch it early enough, it can be fatal. And so they were very concerned about making sure that they got that out of his system. He left the hospital after 5 days with a midline in his arm that had antibiotics, where we'd have to change the bulb a couple of times a day. And he had that for 2 more weeks.
Okay.
And then about a month after that, he was back in the hospital. He had another cholangitis infection.
Oh, my Lord.
And at that point, his doctor came in and he said, look, like the last time they didn't want to go in and do any procedures to see what was going on with inside because they didn't want to spread the infection by doing that. But this time he said, look, we've got to get in there and figure out what's going on. So they did a SpyGlass procedure, which it's an endoscopic procedure, but it allows them to get a better, a closer look on the bile ducts within the liver and take biopsies and everything. And so our doctor did that. And at that point, after the procedure, he said, look, it's time to get him listed for liver transplant.
Right.
And at this point, if he does not get a liver transplant soon, he has a 90+% chance of developing bile duct cancer.
Okay.
And so that was really scary to hear. We were
Now you're waiting for a life-saving organ.
Yes.
There you go.
Yes. So we were 31 or 32 at that point, and it was, mentally, I was kind of, there were times where I was preparing myself to be a childless widow like that. We were having to have those really, really hard conversations because there with his disease, with primary sclerosing cholangitis, the MELD score that's used to determine your place on the liver transplant list is typically not very high for PSC patients.
Oh, okay.
So the numbers that they look at, those tend to not be super affected by the PSC. And so a lot of PSC patients have low MELD scores, which doesn't put them high on the transplant list, but then they have this really high risk of developing bile duct cancer.
Right.
And so it's a huge challenge. And so we we listed at multiple locations.
Right.
We started getting listed We listed here at Houston at Houston Methodist,
Right.
um, which is an amazing transplant center, but everyone travels in for it.
Okay.
Therefore, their MELD score where they're transplanting at is quite high.
Okay.
Um, and so then we found out that Indiana University Hospital in Indianapolis
Uh-huh.
had lower MELD scores, and that's where my husband is from, Indianapolis. So
Okay.
we traveled there and got
Excellent.
listed there.
Okay.
We traveled to Emory Hospital, we traveled to UAB, we then ended up at Cleveland Clinic where he was listed for a living donor. Houston did not have a living donor program at that time, they do now.
Mhm.
Um, and so then we started sending friends up there to be tested in Cleveland.
Okay. And then that led to his transplant.
Yeah, so we fully expected, so the first donor, potential donor that we sent up to Cleveland to
Yeah.
be tested,
Mhm.
he was in Cleveland the week that we found out we were pregnant with our twins.
Oh, wow.
And so it was one of those things where we're like, okay, it may turn out that I'm giving birth here in Houston and he is in Cleveland
Getting
having a liver
delivered.
transplant.
Right.
And while that would have been incredibly hard for us, like that would be all that we had been praying for years.
Sure.
And
Absolutely.
so, yeah, and so we ended up sending two donors up. Neither of them were a perfect match. We had a third one on the way. And then we found out that he had a directed donation um, from a family whose son was in a skiing accident in Colorado. He grew up about 20 minutes from where I did. We had mutual friends, and his family decided to will his liver to my husband,
Oh,
which is like a 1 in a million chance that that actually
I
works. Like
know.
it's
Yeah.
very rare.
Right. That
Um,
they have the good intention, but maybe everything doesn't match up.
right.
Yeah.
And everything did. And so on January 14th, 2019, my husband received his liver transplant from Clayton Sparks while I was 21 weeks pregnant with our twins.
Wow.
So yes, it was a challenging time, but also, for us,
I'm sure
it
joyous
was
because within a
absolutely.
year you have the transplant and then you have the twins finally.
Mhm. Within 3 months,
But
yes.
yeah, within 3 months, but I mean just within a year span, like
Yes.
that close together for everything to culminate, for everything you've been through at
Oh,
that time. It had to
absolutely.
just be that's a double miracle.
Absolutely. And that's why, like, I share our story now because I feel like, we went through so many hard times. We went through with the pregnancy losses, with my husband getting sick and us having to have like this really tough conversations. Um, and then for it to end up the way that it did, there's no way we could have ever predicted that. There's
No,
no way that,
no, you couldn't have even written a book about it, you know?
right. And so I ended up that my latest book is Impatiently Waiting for Miracles.
Yeah, that's why I
And
brought it. We can't even write a book about it because it's true. You had experienced it, and there you go. So let's talk a little bit about that.
yeah, so I feel like we lived our story in order to share it with other people. I feel like not to only share, like spread hope,
Right.
and to show that you never quite know how your story is going to turn out, but also to show what a huge difference our support system made for us. Like they really came around us and helped us through so much of that. And I know that we were quite privileged to have the support system that we did
Sure.
and to
Not
have the
everybody
people
does.
behind us.
Yeah.
And so I hope my hope with the memoir is that it also, shows other people how to best support others that are going through hard times like that.
Yeah. It's great
Because
for you
it's
to
just
do that. And just like with, being a kidney donor, only somebody like you who's experienced something like this can truthfully write about it from experience to share. and give other people hope that, as the women in this case who've gone through infertility with that book, have a support system and have somebody else that, hey, it's not just me going through this, right?
Right.
So,
And the book shares the good, the bad, the ugly, every it's very raw, very honest.
right,
And it goes through the full transplant process as well. And the fact that I developed PTSD after his transplant and the birth of our twins, after all that we had been through
the
and
trauma
kind
you
of,
experienced, right?
yeah.
So it's
So
very
how,
understandable. Well, let's talk a little bit more about this. We're going to take one more commercial break, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be right back with another episode of Drive for Life.
Hi, we're the Soberowski family.
Yeah, Soberowski family.
And what's your name?
Thea.
I'm Keith.
And I'm Mallory.
My dad named Keith and dad Mallory.
In December of 2023, Bear had a kidney transplant.
Yeah.
Texas Children's Hospital in Houston, Texas.
Yeah.
And throughout the whole process, Kidneys for Kids was right there alongside us. They helped us make the important connections with the media to get their story out there and ultimately help us find his donor.
And at multiple times, they have helped us with financial assistance during a very difficult time where we were living between multiple cities and racing to go to different doctor's appointments to make sure that he could get his kidney and everything went off without a hitch.
Thank you, Kidneys for Kids. We don't know where we'd be without you.
We love you.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to our episode of Drive for Life. Again, I'm your host, Brian Martindale, and this week, Abby Gray has joined us, telling us about infertility, about liver transplant for her husband, about their miracle birth, and we're going to talk a little bit more. We talked about her first book. Well, let's continue on that before we get into the rest. Your memoir?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I, over the years, through all of the blog posts that I wrote in real time of, what we were experiencing and everything.
Yeah.
And so I was able to use a lot of those blog posts to kind of, revamp them, and almost remind myself of how I was feeling in all of those moments. And so it is very raw and emotional, but I really hope that it helps so many other people who are experiencing any kind of hard time. It
Right,
doesn't
not
have to
just
be
infertility,
infertility or
Right.
chronic illness or liver transplant or any of those things. Like I wrote it in a way that it's very relatable to anyone who is waiting for a miracle, anyone who is going through something that they don't know whether they can get to the other side of it.
Right, right. And tell us how they can get, the audience can get that book, first of all.
So if you go to Abby Gray Writes, it's ABBYGRAY and then writes, like
Okay.
writing, .com.
All right.
And both, yes, that book is available there.
Okay, and we'll list it again at the end of the show. And now you got into another authoring of another book. Let's touch on that one. This one is Clayton Sparks Leaves His Mark. So tell us about that.
Yes. And this was actually my first book. So and we have a very unique situation in that it was a directed donor. And so we
Right.
developed an amazing relationship with our donor's parents.
Okay.
Clayton's parents, Beth and Larry Sparks, we call them BB and Pops.
Oh,
Clayton was 24 at the time of his accident.
okay.
And so that was their chance that, they no longer were able to have grandchildren. They were no longer, there's so many missed things that,
Because of losing
when
their
their
son.
right, when
Yeah.
their son, yes, when their son passed, it's not just, it's not just the loss of the person and you missing them. It's also the loss of all of the future opportunities and things that you looked forward to doing with them.
Sure.
And we, once we met Beth and Larry, we actually met them the week before the twins were born. They came to our house and we had really good conversations, and it was just this immediate bond. And shortly after the kids were born, they were just all in with them. And so they very quickly became another set of grandparents to our kids. And that's why we call them, they are BB and Pops. If you ask
Right.
our kids, they are grandparents to them 100%.
Absolutely.
They were actually supposed to be at donuts we had donuts with grandparents at our school today.
Oh, okay.
But Beth ended up sick and she was so
Oh,
sad about it. But anyways, we started learning, like, hearing so many amazing stories about Clayton. He was one of those people that was just always doing, acts of kindness for other people. He, from a young age, would always tell his friends, like, you've got to sign up to be an organ donor. Like, why would you not? You can't take it with you. Like, go, please sign. Like, and he was passionate about it, not
yeah.
knowing, the impact that he would end up having at such a young age. And so, after hearing so many stories about that, and then at the time our kids were 2, and Clayton was mentioned in our house constantly. He was our family superhero that we would talk about,
Oh,
how he saved daddy. And
right.
so one day I said, I'm going to write a children's book about him. And my mom is an artist, so I roped her in to do the illustrations.
Oh, perfect.
And she and I worked on it for 4 or 5 months. And then we surprised Beth and Larry with a prototype of the book
Right.
for Christmas in 2021.
Okay.
And then Clayton Sparks Leaves His Mark was released
There it is.
in 2022
Okay.
on World Liver Day. And so it's um, a children's book that really encourages kindness within other kids, and talks about the acts of kindness that Clayton did, but it also opens up the conversation of organ donation within families in a very gentle way.
Right.
So
It is
that
hard to
the
do.
parents, so that the parents can have those conversations when they're ready.
Right. Right. And now it would tell us how that book is available.
So that one is also available on Abby Gray Writes or at claytonsparksbook.com.
Okay.
Both books are also available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, most online retailers.
Beautiful. And then I just love everything that the book's about, and how it makes that bridge, to talking to children about this and gives them the awareness, excuse me, about the miracle of organ donation.
Yes, absolutely. I
Thank
wanted a way to not only like tell my kids who Clayton was and what all he
Right.
did and inspire them to be like him,
Right.
but to also just, find a way to kind of open up that conversation and show how he continued to spread kindness even after his death.
Right. And he performed the ultimate act of kindness just by
Right.
registering to be an organ donor, and then in the end becoming an organ donor.
Absolutely.
So yeah, thank you so much for that. We want to talk now about other things you have going on, the work that you do to support others, volunteerism. Tell us about the organization you work with.
So now I am a ambassador of hope with Life Gift, which is our organ procurement organization here in Houston.
Nice.
I am I I am the chairman of the board. Sorry, I don't know why I'm tripping over my words now. I'm the chairman of the board for Children's Transplant Initiative.
Okay.
So we help pediatric transplant families
Right.
through housing and funding and things like that in Houston, Dallas, and Austin.
Right. And
And
that's how we
then,
connected about kids.
yes. And then I also last year, I'm involved with the Chris Klug Foundation, and last
Yeah.
year was honored to be the Community Champion
Yes, you were.
award recipient.
Another organization we're both involved with.
Yes, for the
Congratulations on
CKF
that.
Awards.
And I get to
Yeah,
meet
and
the crew this summer on my trip. After I see you,
awesome.
when I get to Denver,
Yeah.
I'll get to you first in Houston, but Yeah, it's
Good.
so funny how so many people, in the organ, donation area, these organizations, how we end up connecting, in so
Yes.
many different ways. I mean, so many great.
It's not a community that you want to Jess was saying this on a podcast with CKF. Like, it's not a community that you want to be involved, that go, that you say, oh, I want to have some sort of,
Right.
I want to have an organ, a organ transplant in my family or
Or I
something
want
like
to
that to
be an
get
organ
involved
donor.
in.
Yeah.
Yes, but like once you find yourself in that community, like it's the most amazing community.
It is.
And it really, like, there's so many people that are just working so hard to spread awareness about organ donation, to
Absolutely.
just to help other people that are going through it. And so I feel like we, not only did we live our story to share it, but we also were so privileged in the process,
Yeah.
that I want to be able to make those connections for other people and to help them through the process as well. Because just talking to people and making connections as we were learning more about transplant
Yeah.
made a huge, huge difference.
Right. Knowledge is power.
Yeah, absolutely.
Everything that you didn't know that you now know, it was because of lived experience. And you're taking that lived experience, whether it's with children or adults, and you're applying that, in your volunteerism, what you're doing there with the Children's Transplant Initiative. I'm waiting, to be, come down and be involved with that, to meet everybody at Life Gift. Texas Children's Hospital is going to be one of the
Yeah.
31 hospitals that we visit this summer. Just so you know, ladies and gentlemen, Abby is one of our Kidneys for Kids ambassadors now, and our ambassador in Houston, Texas. So we're going to be meeting, personally in June. We're going to be doing an event together to promote living kidney donation as well as deceased organ donation, because we both support both, whether it's through Kidneys for Kids, through Texas Children's Hospital, through the Chris Kluge Foundation. And it's so important that everybody understands, who's watching, the powerful message of living and deceased organ donation. So,
Right.
yeah. Yeah. Can we touch on anything else you may think of that we haven't already? I mean, you're doing so many wonderful things. You've had experienced so many hard things, unfortunately, to get where you're at. But, tell us now how it feels. You've gone through, to have the miracle children, to have your husband, and to be where you are today, helping others.
Absolutely. I do want to say that it wasn't something where, okay, we received the transplant, we got our kids, like, it
Right.
wasn't like a switch flipped, like, oh my gosh, we have everything now, we're
Right.
amazing and life is beautiful. There was a lot of mental and emotional challenges that we had gone through. And I think, and that's why, I talk about it at the end of Impatiently Waiting for Miracles, is that, like, it caught up to me, and it was one of those things that about a year after the transplant, I was like, why am I not happy? Like, what is going on? Why am I so anxious all the time? And I realized that it was one of those things that it caught up to me after the fact. And
Right.
so I
Because
think
you
it's
spoke of the
important.
PTSD.
Yes, and that's when I was diagnosed with PTSD and anxiety, and I think it's important to talk about, because I don't ever want to give the perspective that, okay, we had gone through all these hard things, and then because things started going right, all of a sudden it
Everything's
was a
okay.
switch flipped. Yeah,
Right.
and it that wasn't the case, and so I had to do a lot of therapy. I did a lot of EMDR therapy, talk therapy. I went on medication for it, and so it definitely, I don't ever want people to think that, like, it's just all of a sudden we were great and life was wonderful. It was still a process.
Sure. Sure.
Even whenever you get everything you ever want, if you went through hard times to get there, that's still a lot to process and to work through. And so I do want to, be very open and honest about that it was a process. And yes, we were blessed in a huge, huge way,
Right.
in multiple ways.
Right.
Um, but we also had to put in some work to kind
Work
of
to get there.
yes,
Just like
absolutely.
with anything in life, when we say, I mean, nothing good in life is free. And
Right.
unfortunately, you know, in this case, so many people like you, whether it's in transplant, infertility issues, you know, have to work through these things and hopefully come out where you are, but still, it doesn't discount the fact of everything you had to go to get there.
Right, right.
So
And so I never, yeah,
yeah,
I wanna honor the you know, the miracles and everything, but not discredit the journey that it took to get there.
yeah, and thank you for saying that because everybody
Yeah.
watching tonight, I want both men and women to understand all the facets of everything that you guys went through in both situations in life, and then everything you're doing because of your gratefulness to help others right now. So, Abby Gray, I want to thank you for being with us today. It's just been a wonderful interview. You'll
Thank
find the
you.
links again, ladies and gentlemen, at the end of the show. Please go to these books. Please purchase these books. Well worth what you're going to learn from each one of them. So again, thank you for joining us for another episode of Drive for Life, and join us again next week for another exciting episode. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.